This happened when I was a child, so some of the details are pretty hazy, like my exact age when this all happened. Also, English is not my first language, so apologies in advance for any mistakes. Not far from where I lived as a child, there's a place where one of the local rivers cascades over an old weir, and it's a really beautiful spot to bathe and swim during the summer. The water upstream from the weir is nice and calm, and the river has a lot of fish. There's also pretty flowers dotting the riverbanks, and there's even a small kiosk and a place where you can rent paddle boats. If the weather is very nice, there's usually a lot of people of all ages, picnicking, sunbathing, swimming, fishing, and just generally hanging out. Families, couples, teenagers, seniors, everybody likes to go there. When I was a child, my mom would also take me there pretty often, and honestly, it was always a lot of fun. I usually wanted to play in the water for hours at a time, and my mother would quickly retire to our picnic blanket and pick up a nice book. I could already swim fairly well by age 6, but she still watched me closely when I was younger, so I would estimate that I was at least about 8 when this happened, and definitely not older than 11 though. It was a beautiful and warm summer day at the river. My mom was reading her book and let me explore the area and go swimming on my own that day. As was normal on days like these, there were quite a lot of people around, and especially a lot of teenagers up at the crest of the weir, where most people entered the water from. I'm afraid I don't remember the exact details of how it happened, but I sort of befriended one of the teenage girls there. She was there on her own, and since I was still really young, I thought she was so mature and cool, basically just for being an older girl who was doing things on her own. No idea how old she really was though, as everybody who's older than you at that age is just old looking, but looking back I would guess about 14 to 16. She was really nice to me, and seemed to enjoy hanging out with me a lot. I got to have a feeling like I had an older sister for a while, which was honestly very nice. We spent some time exploring the riverbanks, diving, watching fish, and chasing each other around. At one point, we ended up at a spot where the water was about chest high for my friend, and neck high for me, and close to another group of teenage girls who were about the same age as my new friend. I noticed one of them seemed really reluctant to get into the water and kept complaining that it was freezing. I was still a pretty loud-mouthed and brash child at the time, a pretty far cry from how I am now, and also really proud of my clearly superior swimming skills, so I turned to my friend and said something pretty harmless. Something about the girl being a big wuss or something like that. I wasn't very loud, but she had heard me. Her head snapped up, and she immediately jumped into the water and came at me shouting, "What did you say? What did you say about me?" I was freaked out right away, because her reaction was just so sudden, and she seemed enraged in a way that was completely disproportionate from what I had said. I opened my mouth to defend myself somehow, and tried to de-escalate the situation, but before I even knew what was happening, she had grabbed me and pushed me underwater. I struggled for a moment before she let me come up again. I think I heard my friend protesting in the background, but I was mostly concerned with this girl who still had a death grip on both of my shoulders. She stared at me with a look that made me really uncomfortable, like she was fighting with herself or trying to control herself. "What did you say to me?" She screamed at me. As scared as I was, I resented how helpless I felt that I was being humiliated right in front of this cool girl I had just befriended, so I resolved myself to not show any weakness. You know, this obnoxious thing some kids do when someone tells them off, and they just start giggling and laughing, like they're laughing at you, because they don't want anyone to see that they feel bad. I did that. I laughed right in her face, and right away, she forced me underwater again. She held me down for a lot longer this time. When she finally let me come up again, she screamed right in my face, You think this is funny? You like that? You want to laugh at me, you little bitch?" I was coughing up water by this point, drooling all over myself, but I didn't know what else to do or say to make her stop. The only thought left in my head was that I couldn't show weakness, so I laughed at her again, and I may or may not have made another remark to the effect that, unlike her, I didn't mind a little water. I'm not sure anymore, though. What I distinctly remember, and will remember forever though, is her eyes in that moment. It's hard to describe, but the closest I can get is by telling you that something seemed to leave her eyes. Some spark, or whatever you want to call it, that normal, sane people have, just flickered and went out. It suddenly looked like her eyes were just two pieces of hard painted glass stuck right into her face, and there was nothing behind them. I would have apologized then and begged her to leave me alone, but it was too late. She grabbed me by the throat and by the hair and held me underwater again. I struggled as hard as I could, swirling up mud from the riverbed, grabbing at pebbles, but nothing helped. I thought surely she would let me up in a moment. She just wanted to scare me really badly. But I was starting to run out of air quickly, and her grip on my throat didn't ease up even the slightest. I tried to scratch her arm, but I was starting to lose any sense of where up or down was, and what I was grabbing at. When I opened my eyes, everything was just muddy brown and full of bubbles. I realized I was going to drown right there. I was actually being killed by this complete stranger while the sun was shining peacefully and we were surrounded by happy families, and nobody realized what was happening. I'm grateful I don't fully remember what that felt like. When I try to think back to that moment, I just get this feeling of utter helplessness and loneliness. And then suddenly I was breathing air. I was completely disoriented, coughing and puking up water, and there was a lot of shouting around me. My friend was holding me above water and shouting in the direction of the group of girls who were forcefully leading my attacker away. She was still screaming at me and my friend, while her friends were all screaming at her, and just a lot of noise in general, and I have no recollection of what anyone was saying. I was too busy enjoying the fresh air again. And after I had calmed down somewhat, my new friend apologized for stepping in so late. She said she and the other girls were so shocked that it took them a moment to process what was actually happening before they all jumped in to pull my attacker off of me. It took all of their efforts combined just to make her let me go. I was deeply shaken because I was entirely sure she had just attempted to murder me right then and there. I just knew from the look in her eyes. But still, trying to save face from my friend, I tried to laugh it off. I must have done a lousy job because I was shivering all over and my voice was shaking. I don't know if my friend had realized at any point how serious the situation actually was, or if she thought she was just stopping some bullying. Whatever she thought, though, she brought me ice cream and rented us a paddle boat to cheer me up, and we watched some birds together. I'm thankful to her for that. And, saving my life. But to be really honest, my day was kind of ruined after that, of course. I never saw my attacker or the nice teenage girl again after that day, and I said nothing to my mom because I was so embarrassed about what had happened to me. But that, and some other things that happened to me later, cost me most of the confident attitude I had as a child, and I'm a very shy, cautious person nowadays. I'm omitting identifying details for privacy's sake. If your world absolutely cannot go on without them, feel free to DM me. You've got a 50-50 shot of me answering or telling you to fuck off. So, let's take it back to 2007 or 2008. I was 16 when this began, 18 or 19 when it finally went to court. And picture a Norman Rockwell-esque suburban family. Parents, 3 kids, a yard, and a dog in blink-and-you'll-miss-it USA. One random day, a neighbor man has a mild dispute with his neighbor. As a totally warranted response, neighbor man, NM from here on out, took every hose he had and flooded their yard. Solid decisions lead to solid consequences, so naturally he was fined extensively for water waste. My parent runs the water in small-town USA, and because NM lived a block from us, he decided to drive over to the water district, shouting that he was an acquaintance of my parent. A second solid decision of many to come from NM. Absolutely no one takes kindly to name droppers, folks, so tuck that gem away under life facts. My parent comes in and tells him that even if his kids had done this, they would still have the same repercussions, gracefully glossing over the fact that other than maybe driving by one another, none of us had actually ever interacted with NM. NM repeats the name of the man working the front desk, as well as my parents' name, and screams, "Now it's personal," and then he storms out. My family members and I began to see NM at random places constantly. The DMV, the grocery store, at our respective jobs. Apparently when you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and your parents pay for your house, you have all kinds of free time to stalk. What started as random sightings while out and about quickly turned into phone calls. The cliche 90s type of call, breathing and hang-ups, the I can see you variety. At this point, NM was more of an annoyance than really scary, but as I've stated, when you underestimate crazy, you lose every single time. NM began to park across from our house, staying from 6 p.m. to 4 a.m., literally just sitting in his car, blasting music, staring at our house. The fool must have had the determination and bladder of a racehorse, because who the fuck can just sit there for 10 hours? His music was completely trash too. Maybe he was a masochist and into self-harm, seeing as how long he could suffer through that shitty music, and a full bladder. I doubt anyone with a semi-rational concept of social interaction could ever fathom why he did this. This quickly went from 3 to 4 times a week to a nearly nightly occurrence. Imagine being a 16-year-old female that doesn't even feel comfortable changing in her own room because of the prospect that some creep might see through the blinds somehow. Trying to sleep just knowing that he was waiting out there. We were prisoners in our own home, and he began to get bolder. He once drove his car speeding up and onto the sidewalk, directly at my sibling and her partner when they were on the sidewalk out front, coming home from a date. They both had to physically jump out of the way to avoid being hit. He made lewd gestures at me when I brought my dog out for a walk, and was waiting for my sibling to come out and join us. It was so bad, I ended up crying and just going back inside. This had been going on for nearly a year at this point. The cops always said the same thing. There's nothing we can do unless there's a threat made against you or someone is harmed. My parent confronted, meaning tired of his shit and asking him just what he thinks he's doing, NM in the street after my incident, to which NM called the cops, and they came asking us why we were harassing and threatening him. I'll never understand why the system waits until you're a victim, rather than prevents someone from being victimized in the first place. Almost 2 years in now, and finally it's Christmas time. My parent had a brain aneurysm. Fortunately, they made it through without any lingering effects, which is extremely rare. I convinced my other parent, who had been living at the hospital with their sick partner, to come home and shower and eat. About 9 p.m., we get a knock at the door. A random man in ratty clothes holding a Christmas present says he's there to deliver it to our family name. We ask who sent him, and he says that he can't say. We ask who he works for, and he shoves the gift at my parent and just leaves. We obviously were uncomfortable to open it. My parent decides they need to know what it is, and opens the present. Inside is a 17-page document of the grounds on why NM is suing my parent that was currently in the hospital. Even I could tell it was fake, with the grammatical errors and typos. That man took the time to sit and type this up himself, thinking that it would scare us. The document and fake details he put in did not. The fact that this 40-something-year-old man was so fixated on our family that he sat and typed a 17-page fake document did scare us though. Things progressed, and NM began pacing in front of his car, pretending to have phone calls where he talked about pushing my parent down the stairs or knowing where all of us kids went to school and worked, how easy it would be to access us at any time. At that time, I worked a closing shift that let me off at about 1 a.m. He would be parked next to my car every time and follow me home. One time, he even tried to take random roads, and he still stayed right behind me. And pulling up to the house with NM parked across the street, think a neighborhood street with maybe 5 feet between a car parked on one side and the one on the other, and having to get out and run to the door was a complete nightmare. We were all exhausted from not only the aneurysm scare, but also from living looking over our shoulders. My parents' friend told her friend who was a DA about the situation. She called and came over, and took our case on pro bono. Testifying was a wild ride. We had to put in official statements prior to being called to the stand. We weren't allowed to be in the room when a family member was testifying, nor were we allowed to talk in the halls as we waited for our turn. Imagine reliving 2 years plus of traumatic experiences, being cross-examined where you're made out to be a liar, and then not even be able to have your family comfort or support you afterwards. It was not ideal. There was enough evidence to put him away for a year and a half, as well as grant a felony restraining order. We moved while he was still incarcerated. My sister passed away while he was in prison, and he immediately tried to sue her estate. She was 21 at the time of her death, when he was released. He claimed that her testimony from him running his car at her and her partner was false, and the only reason that he was locked up in the first place. Not the case, as there were harassment and stalking charges as well. He also said that the money people donated to a GoFundMe for her accident was money he was entitled to. There's so many more details, but this has already gone on long enough. So NM, let's never meet again. You made us prisoners in our own home for years. Clearly you're still the same, and you've never learned a thing from the entire time you were locked up. It happened on July 29th, 2020. It was on a Saturday morning, when my little front door was softly knocked on by one of my best friends. We'll call him Fitz. Fitz had just turned 17 last week, and his father decided to buy him a new hunting rifle, I guess. Sorry, I don't know guns for specifics. I'm not really a gun person, and he wanted to show me how cool it was. Besides a little sprinkle of jealousy, I was very excited to go on my first hunting trip that I'd ever been on. I remember every little detail of that horrible went wrong trip in my head, as if it just happened a minute ago. With a pickup truck and his 26-year-old brother Dan, we left on this trip at exactly 6:43. Dan is probably the nicest outdoors guy I ever met. He talks so softly, but he's big and hits like a gorilla. The only simple way to explain how he looks is, imagine a cowboy, a gymnast, who lives in town but is British. That's how I would explain how he looked like. I can't remember exactly how long I've known Dan and Fitz. It feels like they were already in my life ever since the very day I was born. I took a shotgun with me, while Fitz sat on the back of the truck glancing at his long rifle with amazement. On that 20-minute trip, Dan gave me so many updates about his life during Corona, including the girl he'd been hitting on for the past few weeks. As a brother, it felt like there were no boundaries at all between us. When we finally arrived at a site, it was very quiet. I was expecting at least a bird chirp or shouting here and there like in the movies, but there wasn't anything. Well, to be fair, I could hear a cricket or a toad every now and then, but I was still kind of disappointed. I was expecting the whole bird captivity on my head, and then reality just hits. I didn't have anything, so Dan handed me his homemade spear for fishing. It's faster than using a rod, but be careful with your feet, he said. It was the first time I had gone hunting, and everything in the surroundings was so interesting to me. Being a homeboy who had a spear in his hand, I kept asking for something spearfishing related. My continuous questions started to bother Dan, though, and he sent me and Fitz to a riverbank to figure it out by myself. I was standing near the riverbank while Fitz was prone not far away from me, aiming his rifle at a tree across the river. I had barely even tried to catch a fish. I was looking at him the whole time. He took his first shot, and of course it wasn't good. His body pushed back, and he could barely maintain the rifle in his hand. I laughed, and he burst out laughing too. We both mocked how bad that first shot was, and we got distracted for a few minutes before we decided to give it another try. Here I was, just stabbing randomly at every single movement I could see under the water surface, hoping one of them was a fish and would be my very first game. I was no longer staring at Fitz, but I could hear every shot that he took. That was until I heard the sounds of a different shot. It sounded so much louder, but further away from where Fitz's rifle was. My first thought was, wow, Dan wasn't playing while hunting. Since we scattered apart and he went on his own. 1 shot, 2 shot, 3 shot. There's nothing weird about these shots. Even if it's not Dan, maybe it's just another hunter. Until after the 4th shot, the tree behind us crackled. Someone shot it. I couldn't see, but I was sure that's how a tree getting shot sounded like. I threw myself to the ground, while Fitz did the opposite. He raised his head from his prone position, trying to find where the shot had come from. Another shot was fired, and I was frightened. I could hear the bullet whizzing through the air. It was close, extremely close. I threw my spear away. I shot up, sprinting towards Fitz, and grabbed his hand as fast as I could. I dragged him out of there, right back to where Dan's truck was. I could hear more shots firing at us from behind, and my heart skipped a beat. My body was shaken, and my knees felt limp for a moment. I almost wept. But I took a deep breath and kept running with Fitz right alongside me, muttering words that I couldn't quite hear. We arrived at Dan's truck, confused about whether or not we should call the police. We decided we'd call Dan first, because he was the adult one, and he was still in the woods. He made the call to call the police, and then 2 officers arrived almost 15 minutes later. We told every single detail to Dan during that 20-minute period, and let Dan explain everything to the police. They did a sweep of the area for another 15 minutes, then came back with nothing. They couldn't find anything, not even footsteps or a casing. They asked us to file a report, but Dan decided not to. Besides, no one is hurt. We sat in silence on the way home, alternate scenarios playing in my head like a movie. What if, I thought to myself. I'm not sure I could ever forget how clear that bullet sounds like when it's whizzing just past you. It'll haunt me at night forever, and it honestly still is. Dan told my parents about this, and they're just glad we're okay. Everything went back to normal on Sunday like there's nothing going on. But what if one of us couldn't make it back to Dan's truck? Would everything have turned out the same? What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you liked the video, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. And if you have any comments about the way I narrate, the way I do my videos, or anything, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, as I could always use feedback on how to make my channel just that little bit better. For those of you who are at all interested about my life at all, the next school semester begins on August the 22nd, so that means it's going to be starting pretty soon, so I'll be going to school. I don't think that's going to affect the schedule at all. I'll still be making videos once every 2 days or so, since I really feel like that schedule is the most comfortable for me, and I really enjoy making videos, and it helps me relax during all this craziness going on. Anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know that in case something does affect the schedule, I will let you guys know right away. As always, if you guys want to contact me at all, then please be sure to take a look in the description below. It contains links to all of my social media, including my Gmail, Twitter, Facebook, and Twitch accounts. If you guys would like to get a fast response, be sure to message me on either Twitter or Gmail because those are the ones I check most often. I don't check Facebook quite as much, so it might take me a little bit longer to reply to you on there. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include the name of the story if it has one, what type of story it is in the tagline if it applies, and also be sure to include how you would like to be credited in the description of the story the video appears in. Please, if you guys send in stories, make sure it's at least a couple of paragraphs long with as much detail as you are comfortable describing, and please make sure it follows basic grammatical etiquette, because sometimes I get stories that are just a little bit too short. They're only about a paragraph or so long, and those take me about 30 seconds to read, so they're just a little bit too short to be put into the videos, unfortunately. As well, I must shout out my friend Alan, who does horror art, and he also does commissions as well, and sells his own merchandise and stuff, and has his art in galleries and everything. Links to all of his social media will be in the description below as well. Be sure to check him out and give him some love because he is a very good personal friend of mine, and he also does some excellent art. If you're curious about the music used in this video, it can always be found in the description below the video in the order which it appears in. I have links to the artists as well. As for the new channel, I'm still not sure what I'm going to do with that. I will try to give it a shot this weekend. I was a little bit busy getting ready for school and stuff this semester, so we'll see how that turns out. I still got to decide on mascot and everything for it too. Anyways, I think that's pretty much it, guys, so thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.